No, no, sir. I cannot have your daughter's hand in marriage. Thank you for the offer, though. I appreciate it. I really do. Hi, my name is Anime Reviewer 69, and welcome back to another anime review. Now, as you 69ers know, I always try to have a full, comprehensive review of the series that I am reviewing in order to give you guys the best example of that product. Now, this usually means watching a show in its entirety, getting a good understanding of the characters, the motivations, the plot, and then applying my great analytical knowledge to give you guys the best overall review of that product. However, thanks to a fellow 69er on Twitter, @AstroVideos, we're going to be reviewing the newly released Pokémon 1997 anime based solely on the first episode. Now, obviously, it's pretty close to impossible to get an overall understanding of a show without actually seeing 90% of the material. However, impossible is my middle name. So without further ado, let's watch the first episode. Oh.
I got messed up this morning.
That's probably going to have large implications for the rest of the series. That right there is most likely foreshadowing. I can tell. Oh! Jesus! Ooh, poor taste. Poor taste. Poor taste. Really? That is not something I'd say to my wife. At all. Wow, what a stellar first episode. I can only imagine where the rest of the series can go from here. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Pokémon, the animated series, follows Ash Ketchum, a local 10-year-old boy from Pallet Town trying to achieve his goal of Pokémon Master. Aided by his not-so-trusty Pokémon partner Pikachu, it seems like they're going to be going on an exciting adventure together. When talking about the setting, I always like to compare it to, say, for example, the ketchup on a Wendy's potato slice. It's one of those things that is essential to a good overall experience, and the setting can make or break that experience depending on its quality. The setting can be responsible for contributing to a character's motivations, it can be essential in actually driving the plot forward, and it also is just able to kind of engage the viewers in a world that's not like their own. In Pokemon's example, I feel like they struggle in this element because at the end of the day, there really is no appeal in this setting. There was nothing about this setting that really engaged me. To me, it really just felt like our world, but the characters of Pokemon existed in it. It did not seem like a direct correlation. There was no influence on the setting besides these Pokemon just being there. While the setting isn't bad per se, it just doesn't really do enough to cater to the overarching plot. It's not really much of an escape, it's more of a just going to more of the same, but with some additional wacky characters. Now, the one thing that is interesting though is the actual culture of this world, and I don't know if culture really falls under the setting category. I typically prefer to put it into more of a character category, but culture was pretty evident in this. The only complaint I have involving the culture, because they did showcase elements like, you know, the way Pokeballs work and this thing called the Pokédex, like that was super interesting how that integrated with the surrounding characters, but I don't think the way they explained and handled this exposition was very proper. Anybody will tell you the first rule to exposition is to show, not tell. And this first episode did an awful job of demonstrating that. It was very much exposition driven through spoken dialogue, whether it be from the Pokédex itself or from Ash Ketchum himself, who is daydreaming on the side. This series required a narrator, a half-conscious Ash to explain how the starter Pokemon work, and also a robotic side character, like a Navi of sorts, to actually aid in explaining this world. There was no demonstration, it was all just told to you, right to your face, exposition. Which I hate to see. I hate to harp on the negatives, and I promise I'll get into some positives in a sec, but to harp on the setting even further, I feel like they did a bad job of actually showcasing the usefulness of trainers in this world. There were a couple scenarios where Ash got into a front with an opposing Pokemon, and was unable to do anything of his own volition, and the Pokemon did not respect him in any element of the source. While on the other hand, the wild Pokemon did a great job of holding their own in combat. So to me, that just showcases how useless the actual trainer element
of this series is. It really didn't prove to be of any substantial worth, and I honestly could see them hopefully diving into a plot point that addresses this in the future. Now, I have lots of mixed comments on the characters. First and foremost, we have our main character, Ash Ketchum, which I did mention earlier on in the review. Ash Ketchum is a naive boy, literally described as stupid in one of the scenes here. It seems to me, while he does have a caring heart, his actions don't necessarily reflect those aspects of him. Like, for example, earlier in the episode, there is a situation where Ash gets unjustly violent with a Pokemon by throwing a rock at it, and it ends up kind of sparking the tension throughout the entire rest of the episode. Now, this is conflicting for me because while he performs acts like this out of frustration, he also has acts of heroism where he protects Pikachu in a similar case down the line. To me, this kind of frames Ash as reckless. While he does want to be a kind trainer at heart, he seems to have some emotional struggles to actually, get to that point to where he's caring not just for Pikachu, not just in one-off circumstances, but in every circumstance. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt there and assume that Ash is simply a flawed character that is going to learn over time. The one thing that I feel like is inexcusable from Ash, though, is his poorly defined motivations. A character is only as good as his motivations are outlined, and this character simply claims he wants to be a Pokemon master. There is no explanation as to what that is. There is no explanation as to what that means, what that entails. Does that mean catching all the Pokemon? Does that mean winning all the Pokemon battles? I don't know. They don't tell you. For the amount of exposition this series gives you right off the bat, it's weird that they don't even bother to explain what Ash is actually going for. Like, is that a title that exists within this world? Is that like a job position? What does Pokemon Master mean? And to me, having loose character motivations is very, very weak, and it doesn't really allow me to get invested in this character's journey. I know I'm kind of bouncing around here, but one other thing that demonstrates Ash's reckless nature is actually his sleeping habits. There's a on-running joke throughout the first episode how Ash is simply reckless when it comes to being punctual to things. Despite wanting the stream so bad, he seems to be pretty inexperienced in actually making it a reality. I'm kind of framing it as something bad, but in reality, it does showcase his childish nature and gives us a little bit of an insight on his level of priority when it comes to obtaining his goals. The one thing that I am fearful of, though, is that I feel this will turn into a running gag throughout the show. It just seems like a perfect punchline, a repetitive punchline to go throughout the series. Oh, Ash isn't punctual. Ha 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 ha. With that being said, I hope they don't overstay their welcome with this joke, and I hope they're able to kind of give him development to show that he's gone past that, and they replace this on-running gag with a new gag that fits his new developments. Moving on to other characters, Gary Oak seems to be Ash's long-term friend, rival, just complete jerk within the town. They aren't really given a much of a backstory there. We don't really know much of this character's motivations either, considering it's a carbon copy of Ash, except this guy's mean. And they also don't really dive into how Ash and Gary really know each other. I hope more of that development comes later down the line. That way we can kind of emphasize the tension between these two. While I didn't like his motivations because they were a carbon copy of Ash's already negligible motivations, I did like the fact that Gary had a harem. And I know it's kind of a weird thing to harp on, but I gotta say, as a regular shonen anime fan, it's nice to see a side character get that level of love from a harem. If you guys are reoccurring shonen fans, you guys are well aware that the main protagonist is usually the one that acquires this sort of, group of characters. So to me, it was really refreshing to see a side character get that love, and it kind of emphasized the downsides and the growth that Ash needs to achieve in order to reach Gary's level. One other thing about Gary is I can actually see his ties with the Pokemon leader of the town, Professor Oak. I could definitely see his ties with him becoming a point of tension between the two characters, considering the fact that Ash in and of himself is trying to get the recognition from Oak that, Gary already has. this. Another character that you may or may not have expected me to talk about is actually Pikachu himself. While not being one for words, Pikachu actually exhibits a lot of expression, a lot of emotion, which makes him a character worth investing in. One thing that I think the Pokemon Company did well here is that a lot of the characters, the Pokemon characters specifically, aren't just simply animalistic by nature. They actually do have individual personalities, goals, ambitions, and you could tell that just from this very brief showcase, and you can also tell that just based on their limited expressions alone. However, I do have to say Pikachu's actions were very, very frustrating to watch. He was completely violent, intolerable, and a complete nuisance throughout the entire first episode. Now, I don't know whether this will open up future arcs in the future. There definitely is a chance of that, considering there was one moment where Ash literally was dragging Pikachu by a rope against his will. I hope that specific plot point ends up, blossoming into something about Pokemon rights. Maybe the fact that Pokemon necessarily don't want to be associated with trainers and would like a little more freedom. Now, while there's definitely something to explore there, I feel like Pikachu's treatment of Ash was a little bit over the top. It really just felt like it came out of nowhere. It made me dislike the Pikachu character as a whole, and while there was a silver lining of hope towards the end of the episode, it really did not pull at my heartstrings for the character. To me, the only way they'll be able to redeem Pikachu's irregular behavior is if they give some sort of backstory as to why this behavior exists. Without that precursor of knowledge, I don't think I can get behind these acts of violence. To talk about some of the lesser characters in the show, Professor Oak, I feel like is going to become more of like a mentor character for Ash. I'm sure he's going to be the one that Ash constantly refers to for training, power-ups, that sort of thing. I'm sure he will be able to kind of guide Ash in his way through his journey. I also could see Oak becoming a comedic relief character down the line. He did have some good puns, good one-liners here that could seemingly translate into a comedic sidekick. So I absolutely could see that becoming a thing. One character that I feel like a lot of people would overlook in their first viewing is actually what I'm going to call Ash's dad. Now, Ash's dad is never explicitly shown in this first episode. However, there is one male behind Ash's mom in one of the crowd scenes that was crying at the thought of Ash leaving. And to me, I felt like that was a subtle foreshadow that this character could have a pretty direct relation to Ash as a whole. Maybe the character is maybe out of Ash's life. Maybe this father figure showed up simply to give his support for Ash and kind of a peaceful send-off without interfering with the, clearly tense family bonds between the mother and potentially that father. I'm not entirely sure, but this character clearly has some sort of relation to Ash, and I hope that this Easter egg or foreshadow or whatever it may be, I hope they dive into this and they explore more of this later on in the show. Now, there is one more character trait that I feel I need to talk about, but in order for me to talk about it, I have to dive into spoiler territory. If you guys want to skip this spoiler moment, please click on the timestamp on screen right now. I will go ahead, I'll cover the spoilers real quick, and then we'll be back into the regular review. So go ahead, click it if you guys would like. One of the biggest complaints I have with the characters here is actually the Horde of Spearow that show up as the antagonist of this episode. Now, believe me, I am always one to have an antagonist that I can get behind. I'm always the kind of guy who would like to be, really able to put themselves in the position of the villain and understand their motivations so I can, have a better connection with them. However, this first episode does a really poor job of framing the Spearow as villains. It's not a good and bad guy sort of struggle, at least not in the way you would expect. As you guys know, Ash is the one that throws the rock at the Spearow, initiating the attack. Therefore, all the events that play out are of volition of Ash's actions. And to me, that is just completely backwards. I honestly don't see how this show can try and frame these Horde of Spearow as the bad guys, when in reality, Ash was 100% in the wrong and the Spearows were acting out of self-defense. And even in the end, when Pikachu saves Ash, it's a self-defensive measure of a self-defensive measure that Ash caused. So for me, the entire time while the writers were expecting you to root for Ash, in reality, I was rooting for the Spearow. So I hope they kind of tie up some loose ends there. I hope they try to make Ash more of a you know, for lack of a better word, victim in these cases, so that we have a reason to root for him. Spoilers aside, there's only one more character I really feel needs mentioning, and I was even debating whether even to mention this character, but there is one other side girl character semi-introduced in this episode. I don't know if she was like a one-off character. We didn't even really get her name, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that. But what I can say is that she did seem to have at least a developed character design, so we might see her for a few cameo appearances here and there within the next couple of episodes. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not actually going to talk about the plot here because there really wasn't much to talk about, and I feel like I've kind of said everything I need to say involving the plot in the spoiler section of this video. There really isn't much more than that. It's a super basic introductory episode. You know what you're getting into if you're watching this. However, what I do want to touch on is some other just random elements that I noticed throughout the episode. Now, these random elements were good, mixed, bad, in the middle. The one really good thing, I'll start with the positive, that I really liked about this show right from the get-go is that there was actually a science lesson baked into the commentary in this show. At one point, one character hands another character a set of rubber gloves and comments on how rubber resists electricity. And I felt like that was super interesting because these rubber gloves end up playing a key role in protecting a character moving forward in the episode. Now, as a father of two, this really pleased me considering a lot of kids are obviously going to watch this show, and if they can learn, you know, a couple things about science along the way, maybe some history, math, I think that's a great way to kind of introduce these concepts without seeming like you're force feeding. So this show did give me hope in that regard, and I hope that you and your kids can have an enjoyable and educational experience from this as well. The other tidbit that I want to mention here is actually the mystery element of the show. I feel like this show did a good job of kind of setting up future episodes, giving us something to look forward to in the form of a magic sign. I won't exactly specify what that is, spoiler reasons, but for those of you guys who know, you know. And I feel like this, you know, outlook gives kids and even adults something to look forward to as the series goes on. It shows that there is much more to come with this adventure and that the writers are thinking ahead in terms of what they're going to implement here. Now, obviously, this could be just, you know, a throwaway sort of magical coincidence, but I like to, you know, give the writers the benefit of the doubt here that they're going to explore this in future episodes. Now, finally, the conclusion. I gotta say, this first episode of Pokemon Battle Monsters was not the best. It definitely had its flaws, it definitely had its inconveniences, it felt very force-fed, there were a couple marketing ploys here and there that, you know, a trained eye could see from a mile away. However, what I can say is that the characters are likable enough, especially the Pokemon themselves. The actual, you know, plot moving forward has potential for sure if they manage to capitalize on the right things. And I also believe that there is room to grow with a series that involves this many memorable characters. So what I will say for my final rating is a 6 out of 10. If you guys want to check out Pokemon Battle Monsters, definitely go ahead and give it a shot. It's available on Netflix right now. It's probably the easiest way to binge watch this show. It's good for kids, adults alike, and you definitely won't go wrong with some mindless entertainment. So thank you all so much for watching. I'm excited to see where this series goes alongside you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed the review. If you guys want to see more like this, hit the like button down below, comment and subscribe, and I will catch you 69ers next time. Peace.